Right, time now for the lead. The F&B Stadium is the stage for the EFF 10th anniversary rally under the theme Years of Unbroken Struggle. All of its elected officials were instructed to arrange buses for constituents to attend the party's rally, either with their own money or by raising funds. The party has defended this decision to ban 439 members from the festivities and promises to fill the 94,000 seats in the stadium. For some analysis on the build-up, we're joined in studio by political analyst Yolokazi Mfuto. A very good morning to you. Welcome to Newzroom Afrika.
Morning, Paul. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for joining us. I mean, a show of confidence, right? 94,000 seats need to be filled at the F&B Stadium. 400 members have been barred from attending the event. What's your take on this?
Well, when the EFF released a statement on Twitter the other day, I was quite in awe of how the stance they took on their leadership. Remember, these people who are banned are public representatives, right? They are councillors, members of the legislature, and from parliament as well, including people from the Central Command team. And they took the stance saying that we made a resolution in January, and subsequently we followed up and said, if you don't raise this money, there will be consequences. And I was just following it through. I think it's a very decisive leadership to show that even if our public representatives are not doing their job, we are going to hold them accountable. For me, I don't see any much problem with it. Maybe, yes, in terms of where do we get accountability, does the top leadership in the party also account the way they want the other colleagues to account like? But I think it's quite a good stance for me.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, what will happen if the stadium is not full to capacity. Then we'll later hear that it's because 400 and more representatives were not able to attend. But let's leave that. This is the third party in Parliament which turns 10 years old. It's certainly come a long way from the changing the face of Parliament with youth and vibrancy. Since Julius Malema was expelled from the ANC Youth League. As, how do you think this should be interpreted as we go into marking 10 years, looking back at some of the achievements of the EFF and, of course, its stance on policy?
Yeah, so the EFF, remember when it was launched in 2013, right? The one thing that they've done consistently and very well strategically is the fact that they aligned themselves with the struggle of the poor people, right? So when they were launching in 2013, they aligned the Cuban Revolution and the anniversary of the 60th period in Cuba at that time. And they are very good proponents of the Cuban Socialist Party. They take inspiration from Fidel Castro. But secondly, to take the plight of the people of Marikana. Remember what happened in Marikana? So they launched in Marikana in 2013. And now we've seen them going back to Marikana saying that we still represent you. And recently we've seen the EFF, when they interpret their policies, they always say we are pro-poor, pro-the working class. And also the middle class, they find resonance with the EFF because it represents them, right? So policy-wise, they are very much in touch with their own people. Yes, we can talk about the fact that maybe the leadership of the EFF and its constituency cannot fully interpret what the policies are. Not everyone in the EFF is as eloquent as Julius Malema is. But we've seen when Malema speaks, when Floyd speaks, when Sis Veronica speaks, we can tell that these people, they know what they're talking about in terms of the policies that they have crafted. And secondly, these policies represent the people who are poor, working class. And for the past 10 years, I think they've been very consistent with growth. I mean, also changing the tide in how we see politics in South Africa. Because we've seen how they have disrupted Parliament, not in a very bad way, because now people are interested in the acts that are passed in Parliament. They're interested in the rules of Parliament. They're interested in who's the Speaker of Parliament. All this is the work of the EFF. And the other thing that we've seen, they have changed what accountability looks like. Relating back to the story that we've spoken about now with them holding accountable their public representatives. We've seen them during the state capture, and we've seen them there during the Gandla saga on how they say they want accountability and also not sweeping reports under the carpet like the Parliament was doing before the EFF joined Parliament. So they have a good story to tell for the past 10 years. Of course, there were like pockets of challenges that we've seen within the EFF. There are things that we can still root out and say this is not a great thing that a leader should do. We've seen the VBS stories. We've seen the breakaway of Andile Mqintama and stuff like that. So those are the challenges that the EFF have seen. But ultimately, in the past 10 years, I think for a party that was born out of misery of Julius Malema and Floyd Shivambu and the other colleagues who formed the EFF, it is a good story to tell.
Yeah, I mean, you speak about growth. We know that just last year in December, the EFF spoke about how it's now moved over its 1 million member mark, which it was aiming to ensure that they have that number of members. Could the EFF be the exception to the lack of success of previous shootouts from the ANC? I mean, just looking at what happened to COPE, what's happening to COPE, the EFF certainly telling some form of a good story. But you speak about policy shifts. Have we seen any grand implementation in Parliament on these dynamic policy changes that have made significant impact across the country?
Yes, so if we are going to speak of the EFF policies and the policies that the country is implementing. So we know that the ANC also take EFF as its opposition, as much as EFF is in opposition of the governing party in Parliament. So the policies, there has not been much of a change. But remember now, when the EFF posit their policies, they posit them as the best policies that has ever existed. But remember, the EFF was also born out of the ANC. The policies that we're seeing in the EFF, including the 7 cardinal pillars, I have true reflection of the economic freedom of our lifetime in the ANC Youth League that was formulated by people like Floyd and Julius Malema. So in government, we have not seen much policy shift. But within the two parties, the ANC has kind of revamped their policies, refined them here and there to suit the state, the changes that we see now. And then the EFF is still very adamant on nationalization of mines, nationalization of strategic industries. They very much what they refer to as pro-poor, yes. and they very saying these things are very non-negotiable. Therefore, if any other party that wants to align with the EFF, maybe in terms of coalition, they need to adhere to the policies that they want to put forward for people of South Africa.
Pro-poor in terms of policies, but do you think the EFF could really be the trusted party when it comes to improving the living conditions in South Africa, especially considering how big the party is on its economic policies, which are really sort of narrated around former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe and Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez? I mean, that in itself could sound like a mini disaster when it comes to the economic uplifting of South Africans and their living conditions.
Yes, so the EFF and Trust are very, it's a very contested thing. People say that, can we trust them, right? Because we've seen the opulence that they parade when they have their own private events. We've seen the scandal in Cape Town when in one of their parties expensive alcohol was found. We've seen the type of clothing they wear. We're saying that if we are representing the poor and the working class, what does it mean when you wear expensive brand clothing? Meanwhile, you know the people we're going to speak in front of are very poor, right? But secondly, the EFF policies and ideological positioning currently has been in debatable in the sense that now the position is very left, but the middle left, right? And secondly, they take inspiration from Fanon, from Marx, from Lenin. What does it mean for South Africans, right? What does it mean for a poor person in South Africa? Yes, we want to be part of the means of production and also own the economy, also as poor people. But what does it look like? The EFF has not been able to actually properly articulate that, and I think that's where the trust is. But the truth then that we have seen in practice is the fact that people, when they're in trouble in South Africa, when they see incident of racism, when they see incident of a person is being removed from their work irregularly, they're quick to tag the EFF, report to the EFF, because they see that the EFF is very quick in confronting issues. But in terms of the economy and trust, I don't think that it's still something that we're yet to see improve. Maybe if they get into government, the governing seat, then we'll see if then they'll deliver what they're promising the country.
Yeah. Especially delivery on promises will be crucial as we head to the 2024 elections. I mean, where are you pinning your sort of hopes when it comes to the EFF and what could be achieved during the 2024 elections. We're hearing a lot about young people, unemployment being a huge factor. I mean, just looking at what we saw yesterday with Gauteng Premier Banyaza Lesufi, 8,000 young people being accepted into a program where over 1 million applied for. That really talks to the struggles of youth unemployment in the country. And, of course, young people also feeling discouraged at the moment. The economic conditions not very encouraging. And also the youth vote is something sort of like a sacred space because young people aren't coming out in their numbers to vote. How much can the EFF garner? And who is it specifically speaking to? What kind of youth?
Yes, so we've seen the EFF that has attracted a lot of young people, right? We've seen the changes in institutions of higher learning, right? Where now the strongholds of the ANC were losing power. Universities across the country, the EFF has taken SRCs by a storm, TVET colleges and stuff like that. And we're cognizant of that universities are a microcosm of society. So what happens in universities, can it give us an indication what might happen in the country, right? Because of how the dynamics are. And also communities. We've seen some young people in communities relate to the EFF in their struggle. However, now with the results of what could happen next year in the terms of the elections, the crisis that we have in South Africa right now is that there's only about 25 million people who have registered to vote, right? It's about 15 million young people who have not registered to vote. We're still requesting them to go and vote, register to vote so that they can vote for next year's election. So then the challenge becomes that young people might support the EFF on the ground with their phones, but they might not go and exercise the vote because young people in general in South Africa are very discouraged to go and vote because nothing has changed over the years, right? So that is a societal South African problem that might have an effect on the EFF. But in terms of the elections themselves, the EFF has grown since they contested in 2016. So each and every time we've seen that they take up municipalities, they make coalitions, and they're kingmakers in many municipalities. So there is a bit of indication that the EFF might grow. But the challenges that are within the EFF themselves, for instance now the 439, that is being barred from coming to celebrate the 10th anniversary. The impact of what if then they break away from the EFF, or what if now they tend to be removed from their positions as councillors, members of parliament, and then they get disgruntled and then they leave with their constituencies. That might have an inverse impact on the EFF and the turnout on the election day. But it is a promising organization, but maybe with next year's dynamics and the coalitions, they might not necessarily win in being governance taken from the ANC because there's a third opposition. Maybe they will be in coalition and maybe then they can be kingmakers nationally. We'll see about that.
Yeah, it's a wait and see game. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for breaking it all down for us. Political analyst Yolokazi Mfuto speaking ahead of the EFF's 10th birthday celebrations. Let's